am personally so excited to have my dear friend Stacie here. She has been such a incredible mentor in my life over the past couple years. I'll start crying.
Deep breaths, steps,
But she's so special, and I'm so glad that you guys get the opportunity to hear from her today. And so I'm gonna just give it to you because I can't. But we have just been so blessed by our friendship with Tullian and Stacie, and we've learned so much from you guys, and I am just so grateful that you guys get to hear it too, and you get to hear from her as well, and you get to hear from Tullian later tonight if you're coming. And so I know you're going to be blessed, and I'm not going to hold it up anymore. So let's welcome Stacie.
This couple, Gwen and Tyler, have been encouraging to us in a way that, I know that we express it, but they really don't know how encouraging it is. You would think that, especially a person like Tullian that's been from the family that he is and has the success that he does and has at writing books, that he has enough attention, or we have enough people that are encouraging to us. But for me, especially as a pastor's wife, there is a different level of encouragement that is needed. Now I'm going to cry. And Gwen and Tyler have afforded that to me.
Amen.
And
Amen.
it means more than anybody knows.
Amen.
And especially some of you women that have reached out just over the last 3 years or just recently, and just express thanks for what we're doing. If you've tuned into anything that the women at the sanctuary are doing with Open Door and any of that stuff, it is no small thing to be encouraged. And I don't think people are encouraged enough in today's world at all. And especially when you're doing something that's on the front lines. We just celebrated Memorial Day, which ministry is not the same thing as a physical war, but it's a war. It's a battle. And so support Tyler and Gwen. Encourage them. Give them your prayers, your time, your hugs, because they are on the front lines. People in ministry really are on the front lines, and you're towing a line that is not a popular one. And especially when you have a message like you guys are speaking here at this church, which is undeniably the most important message that there is. And Tullian and I are convicted of that. That's why we started the sanctuary 5 years ago. It's why we're doing what we do, because we could not do it, if that makes sense. It wasn't let's start a church. That's always so fun. It's very lucrative. You have a lot of free time, and you get paid time off. No, you don't. And it's hard. It's hard. So they are an awesome couple. Your church feels like an extension of our church. It feels like a cousin, like a first cousin church. Call that family, friends that are family. And so it feels like we're going to another sanctuary when we come here. It feels like we're going to our other church or the Reach, another Reach. It just feels like they're one and the same. So thank you guys for encouraging us. And just continue to encourage Tyler and Gwen, because this is a special place, a special church. And if they're here, then you already know that. But we love them, and we're thankful for them. And these kids, I can't. They have the cutest freaking kids, and there's one of them right there. If you didn't see, they made Tullian and I both a sign, "Welcome back, Aunt Stacie." So see, it's like family. I told you. So sweet. I can't with that. So when we've talked about this before, because there are very few churches that we get invited to that I have a place to speak. I lead the women's ministry at our church, the Sanctuary. I preach for Tullian when he travels. And so usually I'm speaking in those ways, which I love and I'm honored. But when I get to sit with a room full of women in a casual setting, there is really nothing more comfortable to me than doing that. I come from a long line of women in my family. I was telling, who was I telling this earlier to? Who was it, Melissa's? It wasn't Julie. Was it Kira? I don't know who it was. Somebody here. It'll come to me. But I come from a long line of women in my family, strugglers, for sure. I'm from Texas. I am 7th generation Texas. Anybody in here from Texas?
They on those back.
The half-day list. I'm from Texas. Never have I ever been from Texas. I am a 7th generation Texan. When I was born, I made 5 generations in my family, which seemed very normal to me. I thought everybody had, knew their great-great-grandmother. And a lot of people around me actually did. But when I was born, I made 5 generations. And my mother had me when she was 15. My mother's mother, my grandmother, Granny, Joanne, she had my mom when she was 15. So there's only 30 years between my grandmother and I. And so we had this very known family. And just children raising children, for lack of a better word. But that was my normal. That was very normal to me. My mom's the oldest of 5, much like Tullian's mom is the oldest of her 5 siblings. But our families could not be more different. He came from Christian royalty, being, the grandson of Billy and Ruth Graham, and I am the granddaughter of Joanne and one of her husbands. So, all joking aside, Granny has been married like the legal limit in Texas. So it's completely opposite families that we come from, completely opposite planets. South Florida culture could not be more different than the culture and climate that I grew up in Texas. And our families are both really big. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. He's the middle of 7. Tullian is the middle of 7. He is number 4. So I'm the oldest, and he's like youngest of the oldest, but also oldest of the youngest, which then causes all kinds of friction in our marriage because being the oldest, you have certain qualities about you that are different than, his qualities. And he, is very open about his rebellious nature as a teenager and getting kicked out of his home. And I was the opposite of that, very compliant. Because no one in my family had graduated high school without being pregnant before they graduated. One of my goals was to graduate high school without being pregnant, which sounds like a really low bar, but it was a really high bar. It was a serious thing. And to go into college, like I had these dreams, and my family didn't impose that on me, but it was, I was like, this is a real thing. Like I want to make my family proud. Like they've done something good. I was the oldest child, the oldest grandchild, oldest of 17 grandchildren. And so it was like all my first cousins were siblings, in addition to my siblings. And when I graduated high school, I went to a pretty large high school in Texas. And if you're familiar with Texas sports, it's very competitive. And I have played basketball since I was 10 years old, volleyball, basketball. And my goal was to go to college and play basketball. And when I graduated high school, I found out I was pregnant right after I graduated high school. And I had broken up with that high school boyfriend our senior year. We were the same age. And we were not going to get married. We broke up for significant reasons. And that started my adulting, right off the bat. So every dream that I had of graduating, going to college, which I was well on my way to doing, just immediately crashed and stopped. And it was like, welcome to adulthood. Like, welcome to the life now that you've, chosen. And so a lot of my choices then were limited. I lost athletic scholarships. I still had academic scholarships. But my life just completely stopped in its tracks. And I was so fearful of telling my parents, this news, because I was like, I'm going to let them down, so terribly, because they've worked so hard. Very blue-collar family, hardworking family I come from. And there weren't a lot of resources. And one story I tell Tullian is about my 5th grade year of elementary. I had 1 pair of jeans, that whole entire year. And by the end of the year, I had to use this big safety pin to hold them together. And he's like, oh my gosh, when I think of you sometimes, and it is sweet, it's because I think of you and your 1 pair of jeans, when you were in 5th grade. And but that's why I'm saying that my family is so different from his family. And so when we come to this place that we are together from such different places, like of origin, but somehow God, has used all of that to the benefit of us collectively as a couple and individually as people. But there was all of those things that have happened, all of these life instances have been just like chain reactions. And we kind of look on our timeline sometimes and we're like, oh, I really got off track there. I really got off track with what God had planned for me. And I just said to our ladies, because I'm going through a 12-step workshop with the ladies at the sanctuary, and it's live streamed, it's online too. And one of the things I used to think that, like, I'm outside of God's plan. I'm outside of what the path that He has for me. And side note, we all are, because none of it's supposed to be this way. And we have Adam and Eve to thank for that. But if it has happened to you, God knew that it would, and you are not more powerful than God. You are not powerful enough to change the plan that He has ordained for your days. Like, He knew all of your days before you were even born. And so it's a comfort to me to think I'm not more powerful than God. And so that everything that has happened to me, He knew, He foreknew, and He was going to be there for me all of those days. And He has been. It has been the biggest gift to know that God is with me, to have some measure of faith that God has given me, to believe that He's for me and with me, that He loves me, and that nothing can change that. I was raised Baptist, Southern Baptist. Any Baptist in the house? Come on. And in Texas, which is the buckle of the Bible Belt. And so I would run up to the altar call every single week, give my heart to Jesus again, because maybe it didn't take the last time. I don't know. And when my parents, my mom got divorced, and if we changed churches or we moved and we changed churches, you had to get rebaptized to prove to the Christians that you were a Christian. And so every time I would just remember, like, well, I mean, you have to do this. This is just something you have to do. But then as I, got married at 20 and had kids and just really started to wrestle with my theology that I grew up with, I was like, why do I have to keep proving to the Christians more than I do to Christ that I'm a Christian? And it was, I had all these theological questions and not just confusion from being raised Baptist. I really believed that I could pull off the 10 Commandments. By the time I was like 25, I was like, well, I only got like 2 more to go. I mean, this plan is busted. And so even just the truth that I was like told I could even do that, in and of itself is extremely damaging and extremely limiting to, it doesn't even make me a real person. It doesn't account for my humanity. And so as I aged in my 20s, I was married at 20, had an affair when I was 32 with a guy I'd met in college, and he found me after 12 years, had an affair with him, married him, so I got married again for the second time at 32. And it was in that season, that second marriage season, that I was so, my theological hunger was so starved. I was just like, there's got to be more to what I'm, been told. Like, some of these things are not adding up. Some of these things are not making sense. Life is not making sense. And because I come from like the family I do and a Baptist background, my family was always like a second-class family. If you were divorced, you had kids out of wedlock. I mean, you're not speaking, you have no value in church. You're like, you're the low people, and your family's you're not gonna be an elder or, some, a deacon, or, you're not gonna be able to play the piano or speak or whatever. And so there was always this stigma, the ground wasn't level. It really felt like there were different hills and valleys in the Christian body of people. And in 2005, when I got married for the second time, I was a part of a really large church in San Antonio, and it was the first recovery church I'd ever been a part of. And it was just amazing to me. And I had never been through recovery. I didn't have a substance abuse problem. That was for like the people who were addicts. That was for the 12 steps were for people that had these real severe problems. And at that point, these two women pastors introduced me to the 12 steps. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Everybody needs to know these. Everybody needs these tools for daily life. I was like really on fire for this. And at that same time, within the 2 or 3 years, my mom introduced me to Tullian's preaching. I was at her house for Mother's Day weekend, and she was like, you need to listen to this new preacher. And I was like, well, who is it? Because she was like, avid TVN watcher. I mean, it could be who we don't even know. I mean, there's a new person every week. And she was like, well, I don't know how to say his name, but it's Billy Graham's grandson. And so I could hear she started the TiVo, because she had TiVo'd him. So she started playing it in the other room. And what he said, it could have been a woman saying it. It was just what he was saying. I instantly knew that it was true. That whatever he was saying theologically, I knew that's true. That's true about me. That's true about that answers this theological question. That actually makes sense there. And so it was so helpful to me to start untangling some knots. And my mom bought his book because he's written several books, and by that time he had written, I think, 5 or 6 books. She bought one of them. I read it, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then everybody he pointed to, I started reading. I mean, I was just devouring everything I could. Didn't know him personally, didn't know where he lived, didn't know anything. Like I said, it could have been a woman. It was what he was saying that was so incredibly important. And the people that he was talking about, what they were saying. Tim Keller, Mike Horton, Brennan Manning, Robert Capon, all these different writers and speakers and authors that were just phenomenal theologians. And there was just all of these categories he started, he pointed out that helped me. I was like, gosh, if I would have had this when I was younger, in junior high, in high school, this would have made all the difference. This would have helped me think about God differently, because how we think about God means everything. It means everything. Even to the non-Christian. I mean, they still think something about God. They are rejecting God, or they don't believe in God. They still think something about God. And what we think about God is way more important than we give value to. And so it was, I started reading, listening, investigating all this, and I started facilitating recovery groups. And then fast forward to late 2011, I was now divorced for a second time, and there's a ton of details I'm skipping that would, as a woman and as a woman who is considering marriage or has been married or is married now, I have studied marriage specifically more than any other subject I've studied. And because I wanted to get it so right, and I've gotten it so wrong. And so it is something of such value to me. And it is, I think, something very valuable to God. It's the primary horizontal relationship that he has ordained and made. It's the very first horizontal relationship that he made. And so I think it is a crying shame that we spend as little time as we do, especially in churches, preparing people to become a spouse, explaining what marriage means. Even if you're not going to ever be married, maybe you don't even want to be married, to understand marriage is just, I think, key to so many other things. Because we all have parents. We all come from a marriage of some kind, or the lack of a marriage. And what God thinks about marriage and just the value of it is way more than it's the most important relationship that we have and our families come from, but yet we've spent the least amount of time preparing or learning about it. And I think that's just sad. It's extremely sad. So if you want any marriage resources, I will point you to them. I have several, and I have whittled them down to, there are very few good ones. I'm going to tell you that right now. There are very, very, very few good ones, because most of them are, if you weren't in here, I'd say a lot of bad words, but I'm being, protecting her. Thank you. But it is true. It's, marriage has been this albatross to me, that I'm just like, I want to understand it. I need to understand it. And in doing that, after I was finally single for the first time as an adult, from age 36 to almost 42, who's single in here? Ooh, bless it all. Jesus touch. It is not. If you're a single woman, I don't care what age you're. It is. Right here. I'm with you. And until I went through that stage of actually being an adult single woman and entering the dating world, holy hell. It is not for the faint of heart. And it's not like a pool, like a big, vast, nice, sparkling pool. It's like if you spit, and then if you cut a piece of the droplet of your spit off, that's the pool. It's like that little, it's like that much. It's really sad. People are really desperate and dishonest, and it's just really terrible. She clear the path, clear the way.
Single lady leaving the room right now. She's out.
She's like, I'm out of here. I can't.
Not single by choice.
I understand it also. I totally get it. I really do.
I also understand that. No, real talk. So when I met Tullian in person, it was late 2015. So it's been years after my mom first introduced me to his preaching. I've read several of his books. I semi-followed him, but again, I still didn't know if he was married, where he was, where he lived, what church he didn't know any of those things. I didn't know that he had this conference called Liberate. I didn't know a lot of those things. I just knew his books and some things that he was saying specifically about the gospel and the difference between law and gospel, and just who he pointed to. And I get a text from a girlfriend in San Antonio, and she just sent me a text, and it had a link in it, and it was a link to an article that just described his fallout, his wife had cheated on him, and he had cheated on his wife, and he got defrocked, and he got kicked out, and blah, 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 blah. And honestly, for me, I was like, I'm like, that's like a Tuesday in my world. And it was, a little bit, it wasn't shocking to me, because like I said, I counted up a year and a half ago, well, now I have a few to add, all the divorces in my family, and it's a lot. And there have been 2 more added just in the last few months. And none of us set out to be divorced. And divorce is horrible. If you've been through one, if you've experienced it as your parents were, it's one of the top, 3 things that are devastating for people to go through. And I've been through 2 of them, and now, I read this article, and Tullian is now facing this. And again, I was like, well, that's really sad, but it happens. It's not super. They're human people. They're not superhuman. And so I made my first public Twitter comment, because I don't like Twitter. I think it's mean and kind of it's a little bit confusing. And but I followed my sports teams and Tullian and a few other pastors, writers, people like that. And he had posted something that said something about the gospel. It was very benign, but something about the gospel, the power of the gospel. And I made my first public comment that was something about the gospel back. Well, and then within an hour later, I got a message, a private message, which I'd never gotten on Twitter. And it was a benign thank you. So I thought it was kind of a generated thank you. It was, that benign. And I was praying for you and your family. That was about it. Well, then I got another message, and I was I think this might be a real person. And I was in Texas at the time. I lived in Texas. And anyway, a conversation started, and it actually was Tullian. I had some friends that were in the public eye, and whether they were athletes or something else, and they didn't man their social media, so I didn't expect him to actually be the person that was saying the things that were being said. And so we started as pen pals, really. And I was so far removed from his war going on and his, like, just the devastation of his life. I didn't have a dog in the fight. It didn't matter to me, for lack of a better phrase. I mean, I was totally removed from it. And I became this sounding board, really, for him. And because I had been on both sides of the coin. I had cheated and been cheated on. I had been through divorce. I had children. A lot of the things he was about to experience or already had experienced, I'd been there, done that, and had a couple T-shirts, from it. And so that's how we really became friends at first. And it was really more of a pen pal. Again, he was in Florida, I was in Texas. And we get a little further down the road, and he was like, I really think that we should meet. And I was like, well, okay. And I was like, well, when? He's like, tomorrow. And if you know Tully, and he can be kind of impulsive, a little bit. And so can I, in a different flavor, but impulsive nonetheless. And so he said tomorrow. I was like, well, all right. And I'm a single woman. I'm like, I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to go to Fort Lauderdale, which I had never been to Fort Lauderdale. And so we met for the first time in person in Fort Lauderdale. And I stayed at this cute little boutique hotel that I just thought was so cute. And, it's like, if you're like a girl and you're like vintage Florida and you're like, oh, well, maybe I'll get a cute little trip out of it, whatever. And I don't remember where he was staying, but it was down the road from wherever I was. And so we spent this weekend like eating, hanging out by the pool. And when I left that weekend, I was like, I don't know what's going on, but this might be more than just, pen pals. And that was in late summer 2015. And that really started this relationship that was romantic. And we dated for a year. And has anybody read his newest book, Carnage and Grace, besides Gwen? I know Gwen does. Oh, that's good then.
I don't read anything.
Yeah, and if you know Gwen, she doesn't really.
I was gonna, and you read.
I actually did.
So she let it.
I did.
She did read
That's
that.
the third one I've read. That's the third one of his that I read.
You might as well stop.
I had maybe buy two more last
I know she did, but she did buy 2 of his old books on
That's great.
that he didn't even want her to buy, but she bought them off Amazon last night. Yeah. But we dated for a year, and part of a lot of our entire relationship is actually in this newest book of his. And it's not the purpose of the book, but the book can't be told without that being in there. And so it is, in that year of dating, there was a lot of going back and forth, flip-flopping, even though he was divorced from his ex-wife and starting a new life, and dating me, he was still going back, and there were a couple of times that I was like, we're for sure done. But he ended up coming back to Texas in late August 2016, and we were married. So we've been married since late August 2016. And it is no small thing that God introduced us to one another long before we actually physically met one another and had any reason to meet at all. But from what God has done in Tullian's life, especially through his ability to articulate the gospel, to share the message that he is convicted with every fiber of his being to share and just shout from the mountaintops, and the way God has used us together. And I'm specifically more of the recovery mind, just because I am in current recovery, as you are, whether you know it or not. But we're all in recovery from life. Life is not easy. It is full of hurts, and it is full of patterns. And we have those because of hurts, and we have those because of traumas. And so I am very, very focused on that part of, the part of recovery, using, not just believing and learning the knowledge of the gospel and the difference between law and gospel and grace, but actually what does that look like practically, worked out, fleshed out in my daily life? How do I use that to deal with my difficult relationship over there or over here, or with my trauma back there that I just can't get past. And there are the way that God has used this like coinciding of both of our lives at the time that He did is providential, and we couldn't have planned it, which makes me then believe it was God, more so than a manipulation of either of us. And there is no one, I repeat, no one that could move me out of Texas besides God. There is no place I would rather live. My entire family is there. I have 2 sons that are there. My 2 sons alone, I don't even want to be apart from. So it's no small thing that God has done what He's done. And I lean on that because that's literally the only reason I am where I am and we do what we do. And so we're both convicted of that in very, very similar but also dissimilar ways. And it is a privilege and an honor to be His wife, to have walked with Him through what He's been through, to have like the front row seat that I've had, because it encourages my faith. It has, made me believe even more, not because I'm trying to, because God is doing that. God is the grower of our faith. And so this is a way that He's done it in my life. And it's just no small thing. And to be here, like even speaking and being able to do this is proof of all of that. Like that it's, there's something to it. There's power in being a wounded healer. Like we're all called to be wounded healers. We're all wounded. And, we talk a lot about the church being a hospital for sick people. And I use this analogy often with the women at our church that, there are sometimes that you're unstable when you're in the emergency room if you're going through a crisis. And there are others of us that might be wheeling ourselves around down the hall because we're a little further along in our recovery in a certain area. Or maybe we're limping, down the hall and we can offer a hug, care in some way, extend love to another person in some way, be of service to somebody else. But we're all in the hospital. And we just move around to different rooms but we're never the doctor. We're never the fixer. We're never the surgeon. We're never that person, but we are we're all patients there. And so, in some capacity. And so just to, see that as a picture of the body of, like, that is what we are as a church. We're wounded healers. And, when you're in the emergency room and you're unstable, you are unable to give to someone else. You are not even expected to give to somebody else when you're in that state. You can't. You can't give what you don't have. And so with that, part of our whole entire, our church at Sanctuary, we really say that we're a church, a recovery center masquerading as a church, because we really are. And we really try to be unprogrammed so that we can focus on just like person to person, horizontal relationships. Just to hear people, just to hear what they're going through, what they are wrestling with. Because honestly, that's what we need. We need to be, we want to be known and loved, and part of being known is being heard. And when you're not in a marriage, or you're not in a family, or you're just not in a season of life, that you have anybody to hear you, to hear your hurt, to hear your heart, to hear, what's going on. It's no small thing just to be a listening ear, to another person, and especially as women. Women tend to, more than men, I'm fine, I'm fine, we'll button it up, but it's a sweet thing when you're involved in a group of women that you're like, do you have a minute? I need to talk. Like, we feel lighter when we get something off of our chest, when we're able to just lighten the load a little bit, even if it doesn't change the circumstances or fix anything. You can just feel a little bit lighter because you're just like, okay, like I finally got it out of here. Because in here, it doesn't do good things. It just gets heavier and it attaches to other things and it just does all kinds of sorts of bad stuff. But when you can get it out, a lot of therapists say better out than in, and it's true. Better out than. I'll hold your hair whenever you need to vomit. That's really what we need. A girlfriend that will hold your hair. And if you've ever had to throw up, then that's true. That wasn't also on your list, Melissa, but it should have been. Never have I ever vomited. Never have I ever had a hangover or something like that. What else? Does anybody guys have any questions?
Yeah.
Joanne has a question. She stood up.
No, wait, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
We'll do that tonight. Okay.
So I originally wasn't going to ask. I had a question about divorce, but I was like, this perfect Christian lady is not going to want to talk about divorce.
Girl, you can ask me anything you want to. I promise you.
And then, so that's all you were talking about, which was, but just your perspective on it, I'd love to hear, because I had to get divorced when I was 25. I'm 27 now. I was in an abusive marriage, and not physically abusive, just abusive in every other way. And that's not really mentioned very clearly that I've found so far in the Bible. It's just, you commit adultery, you get married again, basically. Like, you just can't get married again. And it's just discouraging and weird and heavy, and like like you were saying, when you're divorced, you're gone. Like, you're just
Trash.
you're tainted now. Yeah. And so I would love to hear your
Ooh, this is a good question. I have cold chills because this is probably one of my favorite questions. Okay. The book of Hosea, such a little tiny, it's in the Minor Prophets, Old Testament. It's one of the tiniest books in the Bible. But to me, top 3 most important. The book of Hosea, read it. If you don't know, Hosea is a minor prophet. He's a man, and God commissions him to go marry a woman of whoredom, Gomer. Her name's Gomer, and have children with her. And this whole, the first 3 chapters especially, describe their marriage and their relationship in Gomer. And she is an adulterous whore. She is unfaithful in every single way she could possibly be unfaithful. And she has this Hosea, this, Jesus type, this figure that is loving her through her unfaithfulness. And it's just one of the most beautiful pictures of God's love for us. It is, to me, a premier picture of God's love for us. For us not to think of ourselves as a body. Yes, vertically, I am spotless, righteous, holy, forgiven. Vertically, I am. But horizontally, I am a Gomer. And so are you. And so is everybody else. So is every man. This is not just a female thing. This is a picture of the body of Christ, that we are the unfaithful bride, that we are all adulterers. And yes, divorce is bad. God hates divorce. He also hates all sin. In the garden, Adam and Eve weren't, fornicating with other people and, cussing out people or drinking and like doing drugs or whatever, not going to church. They disobeyed God. Their unbelief was on display. All unbelief is the root of sin. And all sin is cosmic treason. All sin is against God, is Gomer. It is the adulterous nature that we all have. And so if we start there, instead of starting with like our social dynamic and scale of socially, like you were married, you were like a virgin and you got married and then you stayed married. Oh, well then you got divorced, and so you're like dropping down. The ground is level at the bottom of the cross. And if we don't start there, the ground is level. There are no step stools. It doesn't matter how high my stilettos are. The ground is level. There is no hierarchy to God. When He's looking down on all of us, we all look like the same level. Whether we are propping ourselves up or somebody else up or holding, some, thing that we think, well, I still got this. I still got this thing. I'm still up here. So divorce is devastating. And it is just absolutely a horrible, horrible thing to have to go through. It is necessary. And so I think that we forget that God is also not for marriages that shouldn't take place. people that enter into relationships there's nothing that we're entering into that's not sinful. There's no marriage, even like the most beautiful marriages that you know of, they are tainted as much as any other one. Sin is sin. So there's no more dilution of it or not. And so to start with the picture that the ground is level and that God sees you no differently before your divorce, before your marriage, after either one of them, you are the same to him. Now, to other people in the world, if they want to treat you less than because you've been divorced, well, I have some words for them.
Is Millie here?
Yeah, it's really okay. This was, PG-13, now it's going to be R. I have a real, my mom is 66 years old. I'm 50, she's 66. Her birthday was just in February. And my mom has been married 4 times. And like I said, she had me when she was 15. And she's been married to my stepdad now for 38 years, almost 39 years. Wow. It's her 4th marriage, but it's my stepdad's first. And he was the only son of a family, and they absolutely did not want him to marry my mom. And they were just like devastated. They were, just like, how could you do this? You're our only son, and you're marrying this woman who has 3 kids at that point by 2 different dads. She's been married 3 times already. Like, what are you doing? And they still don't like my mom. And but he is the man I call dad, because he's been the only stable, consistent dad for me, and he has never treated me like I'm less than his whole daughter. And he has loved my mom so well, and incredibly well, and me and my youngest sister, Marcy. But whether you ever get married or not, you are no less valuable to God, and you are no less a Christian because you've been divorced. And for churches, especially Christians, are really, really, really shitty when it comes to like telling you, well, you need to stay in that marriage.
That's what happened to me. Yep.
You need to stay in that marriage.
I got the whole, well, I don't see any biblical reason for you. Even when I told her I was scared of this man,
right.
It was like, there's no biblical reason that I can like promote you getting divorced.
Right. Which and there's a wise counsel in to someone, which we counsel a lot of people that are going through marital issues, and addiction, abuse, abandonment are the 3 that are actually biblical and mentioned in the Bible. Could you get divorced for some other reason? Absolutely. Should you? I don't know. But I'm not the one having to live in there. I'm not the one in those shoes. I'm not the one in that bed. And ultimately, God's going to love you no matter what. And there's hope on the other side of that. And I hate for people to go through the consequences of divorce, especially when there's kids involved, because I've experienced that as a child of divorce, and someone who wanted to keep a whole family for my own kids, and I couldn't. And that's really all I wanted to do. That was like an idol to me, honestly. We can make marriage an idol. We can make those things, an idol in a way that they're not made to uphold that. They're made to be an idol. But you'll be just fine. You'll be just fine. Let's see what this says.
So good.
Do you have a life verse? No, is the short answer. I do have a few verses that I really think about, probably more than others. I don't have a life verse. Romans 12:2 sounds like kind of a common verse, but I used to use it actually on my business card in Texas. I had an interior design firm, and so I thought it was like really like a dual, do not conform to the patterns of this world, be not transformed by the renewing of your mind. So I was like, pattern. Look what I did there. But it really was like, God used it in more ways than, just on my business card, because that's all he's consistently doing. It's just renewing my mind, because that's really where it is. Like, I may know, we don't lack for knowledge, but my ability to believe it, to believe it. I know something, but I may behave as a functional atheist, even though I know God and I believe God and I believe in my salvation. I believe in my forgiveness. But I don't always act like I do. I don't always make choices that reflect that I actually believe, which is where my sin is. I believe, help my unbelief. Like, this is really true. We are all part unbelievers until we die. That's really true. You know, people are like, I believe in God with my whole heart. I'm like, well, you don't, and that's okay. Because you can't this side of heaven, but all right. But you do you, girl. See how that works, because God will show you that there's some unbelief, and it will rise to the surface, and you'll be like, see right there. And you'll work on that spot.
Exactly.
And so, I'd say probably Romans 12:2 is one of the biggest ones. There are a few others, but I don't have just one life verse, or like I don't pick like a verse a year. You know, like I'm not knocking people that do. I just don't. But there you go. Let's see what this says. How did you get through the hardest trials in your marriage? Well, God, first of all. People have asked, considering a lot of the details just of my life, but especially with Tullian, I can't really tell you how. I honestly don't know. I really do think that Tullian makes fun of that footprints in the sand poem, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody used to have like a, hang in their bathroom or at the end of your hall, has like a little picture of it. And for a long time, I think my great grandmother had it, and I just remember thinking, okay, for a long time I believed it, but then I was like, well, it's not true. And so now neither of us think that's true, of course. But I don't know how. If I could tell somebody, like, here are the steps, like, you are where I was, here are the 5 steps. Trusted, tried, and true. I would give them to you. I brought them down and put them to you. But it's really not that easy. God got me from this place to this place. I really don't know how he did. I just know he did. And that's really part of, looking back. Because in the moment, it certainly didn't feel like I was being taken from here to there. It felt like I was just stuck in a Holy Saturday, just darkness and nothing resurrected, and everything is dead. And so that in and of itself, just recognizing, I think being aware of where you really are in a situation, especially if it's marriage, because marriage is, I am sinful in and of myself, and when I get married, I'm doubling my sin. But, now I'm like sharing life with another sinner very closely, and so it's like sin is amplified, and everything in me is amplified because he is wired to push my buttons, and vice versa. And some of those are good buttons, and some of them are not. And I think it's very purposeful. It really makes you lean on God in a way that otherwise you just wouldn't. If I think I can do it on my own, if I think I can get through the hardest trials on my own, then I have less reason to depend on God. And so it is just in the last month, there have been several moments in my marriage right now currently that I have been pushed to the edge of like my own ability, my own resource to do something, to withstand something in it. And where some of me wants to just fight and rail back, I'll fight through this and we'll do this and we'll get but for the most part, I've just been like, okay, God, what you gonna do here? Handle your girl, handle your boy. Like, this is your marriage, ultimately. Like, if you're in charge of this, and I don't know what to do, so you're in charge. What would you like, open my mouth, be a muzzle when I don't need to speak? Holy Spirit, be a muzzle. That's a good prayer. If you had a live prayer, I use that one a lot.
Everybody likes that.
3 life prayers, okay? Holy Spirit, be a muzzle, whether it's for me or other people. But it's not always just for myself.
What are the 3 prayers?
Holy Spirit, be a muzzle. Help. Those are my 3 primary help. It is spelled HAYELP. Help. Those are my three prayers, and they're the most honest prayers, really. Anytime we're praying, we're actually asking for help. It is literally, and one of the greatest truths to that is that, we only are convicted or compelled to pray because God inside of his spirit inside us is compelling us to pray to God. So it's God speaking to God through us, which is just like, wow, okay. That's like, and it's sending it straight to Jesus, who makes it the prayer I should pray and gives it to God.
Amen.
And so it's just like, I just spoke with the women about step 7 of the 12 steps, which is praying about our defects. And I gave them a simple prayer to pray about that. And that, so often I was raised this way, like you have to pray a certain way in order to get your prayers answered.
Yeah.
Even in, John, the verse I just used, I think it's John 6:13, or James 6:13. Confess your sins to one another, pray with one another, so that you may be healed. The prayers of a righteous person, like it goes on to talk about the prayers of a righteous person, which I believed growing up, like, well, I gotta be righteous in order to pray this. I need to be like in a right way, because it was never told to me that I am righteous because I have the righteousness of Christ. But that's the righteousness I need, and that's the righteousness I have, and that's why my prayers are answered, not because I'm righteous, but because I have the righteousness of Christ. And because that's where that comes from. That's makes me pray very differently and with much more confidence. That then I'm not trying to manipulate God, because I'm not more powerful than God, and I can't manipulate him. He's not a God to be manipulated. But for us to know that it doesn't matter if your cries are uncried tears. He understands that. He knows He knows the cry of your heart. He knows the prayers from your heart that you should be praying, because he's putting them there. He's the one inspiring your prayer for help, which I think is very comforting to me. Let's see, what else? Why is your name not Graham? That's a good one. It would be much easier if it were. So Tullian's mom is Billy Graham's oldest daughter. She was married to a Tchividjian. She got married. So she was no longer a Graham, and Tullian is his mom's son. And his name is Tchividjian. So Gigi, which is Billy and Ruth's oldest daughter, Virginia is her proper name. Gigi is Tullian's mom, and so she was married. So the reason our name is not Graham is because she's not a son. if Tullian's dad were a Graham, then his name would be Graham, but his mom got married, so she is Tchividjian. So go that mom's. And it's Tchividjian. The T is silent.
Okay.
I'm like, I got a 5-syllable last name. And now you're like,
Tchividjian. Here's the tutorial. Okay, it's very easy. And then I have a funny story about it. Tchividjian, because has everybody seen it? It's a little traumatic. It is a lot of consonants. But it starts with a TCH. The T is silent. It starts with a CH, like church, cha, and it rhymes with religion. Tchividjian, religion.
Wow.
Tchividjian, religion. Does that help? Right?
Yeah,
Tchividjian, religion. Super hot word. When Tullian and I went to go get our marriage license, it was in Texas, and it was at this little county clerk's office, and the lady that was working there had been there like all her life. I mean, she looked like she probably gonna die there too. She'd been there forever, and she was holding up both of our birth certificates. She was looking at mine, looking at his, looking at mine, looking back, and then she looked at us, and she looked at him and she goes, you could take her last name. My maiden name was Phillips, so much easier. And at that moment, especially at that time in his life, he was like, I was never more tempted to change my name. But he didn't know. He obviously kept Tchividjian, and his dad is half Swiss and half Armenian. So Kevorkian, Kardashian, Sarkissian, like all these names that we've kind of heard, for different reasons. They're all Armenian. It's IANJIAN. Like, yeah. So a little tutorial on body design. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else?
Thanks for good.
I don't know. Okay. You want to say something?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's thank Stacie.
Oh.